Nerdchachos, how's it going? Thanks for coming along today. So welcome to another episode of our Planet Zoo Let's Play series, where we're building a zoo called Roars and Claws, and it's Flamingo Day. Really excited to build this one because I've got so many ideas and so much inspiration for this one. They're just flamingos, but it's still fun. So previous episode we covered our reflecting pool. I need to just do a little bit of admin work around here. I've realised there's no water treatment, so I need to put this in. But we also built our ultra modern restaurant that sits on the plaza that's going to eventually back onto some areas. But like I say, today's episode is going to focus mainly on this one here, where we're building our flamingo exhibit that will then eventually lead into the area that's going to have either gargoyles or crocodiles, something water-based. And so I'll probably do a little bit of work on layouts and stuff here because I need this path to come round to create the outside of the flamingo exhibit. But if you missed the previous episode, or if you missed it in the previous episode, we were talking about flamingos and their habitat, and I was asking the question in the very start of the video whether flamingos needed flat land, because in zoos you tend to see everything flat, don't you? And they're in like really shallow waters with islands in the middle and stuff, and apparently no. Doing the research, they actually live on the side of mountains in wildlife, so the very fact that this is quite hilly, quite terrainy, would actually be completely fine. And so that's... Hello, where'd you go? So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to build off our flamingo habitat, get those in, and get those started. And I also, if I've got time, I want to be able to move the aardvarks that I've got here as well. I did a bit of reading on aardvarks as well, so I want those to be up in this area too, and then to have like a food plaza. So I think the next couple of episodes are going to centre mainly on this area here, building the flamingos first, building the plaza area, and then building the crocodile or gharial exhibit here, and then the backstage area that comes along with it. So I've already moved the road slightly so that we can get round the back. And put some staff facilities and whatever here, because that's something that we're missing. So without further ado, I will leave the intro here, and I will see you in the first update. Alright then, time for our first update, and this is what we've done so far. I've gone ahead and I've put the barrier and the perimeter fencing in, and I've also done the game barriers as well, so they're all in place. And I've put them all the way around this perimeter here, and also all the way up to what's going to be whatever exhibit this is going to be. And I've also had to do some kind of pathing work along the top here, and I've also had to do some pathing work inside here as well, inside the building, purely because I needed this path at the top, because it forms the top end of the actual flamingo exhibit, and I didn't want to put temporary fencing in just to have to do it later. It was just easier to do it now. And I've also done some terrain work and some water work within the building itself, thinking ahead, because we're going to have water here, and we're going to end up with a lot of flamingos, and it's easier to do the water editing now, knowing what I'm going to do with it later on, than it is to do it later. And so I've just gone ahead and I've just created the beginning of the crocodile enclosure. But I'm not going to do much more to this building now. This is pretty much done. I've also merged the functions of the buildings together. So underneath here is going to be the shelter area for the flamingos, and I don't know how big I'm going to need to make this, or whether I'll need a second shelter. So this is going to be the part where the keepers are going to come in. This is where they're going to take shelter from the rain and the snow and the cold and whatever. And it just seemed like that was a good use of this space, given that this is probably going to be a bit of a glass front building anyway. And I wanted this habitat, this enclosure area here for later on, and so it just sort of made sense that this wouldn't be in use by the crocodiles. It would otherwise be dead space, so I've made it space for the flamingos. I'm going to go ahead and put in a second mesh barrier along here as well, just to make sure that whatever's in this building and whatever's and the flamingos come back, and the flamingos are all in very separate. So they can't actually escape into each other, and if you have a barrier breach, then they still can't be attacked and whatever. So I've put a flamingo in already. There he is. Hello, flamingo. Just the one for now, because I'm just doing some checking of the environment, the habitat. I've done a check on the traversable area, and it looks like all is good. There doesn't seem to be any escape points, which is good news. I didn't know if the barriers that I was putting in were tall enough. So I know that the barriers need to be at least 1 meter tall. And so I didn't, and because I've been placing these individually one by one, I didn't know if that was going to be enough, if they were going to be tall enough. But it looks like they are. They can't get out, and it looks like they're going to be able to get down to this bottom area through here as well. Now I might just do some terrain work here underneath the bridge just to make sure that there's a bit more clearance and they're not having to walk along the water. But I ultimately wanted this whole area to be massive. In reality, in terms of games and in terms of real life zoos that probably wouldn't put too much effort into their flamingo habitats, this area here would probably have been enough. It would have been perfectly sufficient, and then have something else, rivery, whatever animals we've got that could deal with rivers in here. But I actually wanted to really exaggerate the space, purely because the game later on, when they start to reproduce and they start to have their babies and whatever, space becomes a real reason. A real issue, and it's the reason that we've done the same here with the turtle habitats, the tortoise habitats, is that the smaller the habitat and the more you've got, the worse the game performs when it comes to welfare and the more admin and maintenance you have to do on it. So I've taken the decision to make a much bigger area so that we can have a bigger flock of birds that can then be easier maintained. So that's the main thought process around that. So the next steps here, I'm not going to do any more to the backstage area. This is all going to be the next build that I'm going to do. So I'm just planning out where things are going to be right now. So the next stages for this build are going to be about the flamingo habitat, starting putting in some more facilities, start to do some of the lining and the vegetation and everything along here. And like I say in the intro, I'd also like to move the aardvarks over as well. So I think the aardvarks are going to come up here, and I may start to do that sort of work as well. So that's it for this update, and I'll see you in the next one. Alright, second update time, and here is the work that I've been doing over the last hour or so. So we've got flamingos in the habitat, and they seem to be relatively happy in the habitat. I've put down the food sources, the water sources, the enrichment items, done the research, etc. So that's all been done. And I've also been working on the actual natural landscape of the habitat as well. Making it mirror what we did at the entrance and making it look like it's a little bit flowing. So I've used the same techniques that I did in the last episode. I've just put the rapids foam next door to rocks to make it look like it's flowing, and I've done the fountain splash upside down just to make it look like the water's bouncing off of reeds and rocks and stuff. It just gives the water a little bit of movement. Still think this is probably running a little bit too fast, but it's okay. I mean, like I said in the last episode, it is what it is. You know, you've got to work with what you've got. I think I want to leave this riverbed as just soil and rock. I don't think I want to do any kind of vegetation to it. I like the idea that it sort of meanders its way around and varies in different widths and everything. And I'm toying with the idea that I've got too much vegetation here. And I know that the flamingos are starting to struggle with the amount of plants that are in their habitat. So even though there isn't actually a lot to see and a lot to do, I think this is possibly a little bit overkill, and we're starting to hit the limit of the number of plants that they will allow in the habitat, or that they like in the habitat. And I've still got to do all of this area, so I might tone this bit down a little bit and just make it less planty, less plant based, so that I can use some more down here. But I like this idea of having rock lined water, and I haven't done the effects and stuff down this side yet, but I like this idea of having a bit of movement in the water and having it a little bit narrower, and it's going to be a bit rocky, and I like it being a little bit natural as well. I know that normally flamingo habitats are all just very concrete, very bland, very minimal effort, and I think this is what I want to do in this zoo as well. Keep it minimal effort, not super detailed, but also realistic. So they're going to want to have these areas of plants, right? They're going to want to be able to play in the plants and hide and stuff. And I've also just started the process of the forage pools, and I've got two designs that I'm sort of toying on at the moment. The first one is a more natural looking thing with some rocks. Again, don't want to hide them. I want them to be obvious that they're foraging pools. Don't want to bury them underground or anything like that. I want them to be pretty visible. And then this other one where I've used the Asian support pillars. And I've just used that to outline it slightly. this is still traversable. They actually come in, they fly over the top, jump over the top and into the pool, and then jump into the water if that's what they want to do, and then just try and soften the edge of the actual forage pit itself with just foliage and vegetation. And I quite like this idea as well of the bank. So I'm going to see if I can keep this idea and just make the water move near the bank. And I think that's then going to help out with this issue that I have with the number of plants that I'm using and this desire to try and hide the outline of the water. When in reality, it wouldn't, would it? It wouldn't be plants the whole entire way. You'd have exposed banks. So I just need to find a way of working that in somehow to make it a little bit more natural. And I then also need to do this bridge. This bridge is working out quite well, actually. It's working out quite well as a bit of a shortcut between Slithers and Scales and down to the main plaza area that we did this way. So it's working out nicely. And this area here with the what's going to be the well, whatever I keep saying, gharials and crocodiles, and so I don't even know what's going to go in there yet. Which of the two? There's not really a lot more else I can do with this area. I can detail this bottom bit, but I'm not going to touch the top bit. That's going to be decorated when we actually do this build instead. But I'm liking how this bit's starting to come together. It's feeling like it's a bit of a wider body of water that goes down into narrow, and it gets faster and faster flowing as it hits this way. And then the bridge obviously is just there so that the keeper can get across to the other side. The animals themselves can traverse through the water, but the keepers can't. So that's just there for their benefit. And it's actually quite handy that she's about to jump up. So yeah, that's I think that's all for this update. It's starting to come together. I just need to sort out this foliage problem where I'm using too much, thin it out a little bit and make it look a little bit better, so that I can use foliage down the river. So that's it for this update. I'll see you in the next one. Alright, quick update time then. So, I know I said I wasn't going to do any more to the building, but I sort of lied. I had to do a little bit of work to the front of the building just to get an understanding and a feel for how the area is going to come together in general. So I've just put a fascia to it. There's no detail or anything to it. And there's not really much to show in this part of the update, but there's quite a lot that's gone into it. And so I've managed to thin out the plants quite considerably. And that's purely because I wanted to put trees and break up the open space elsewhere, so I needed to thin it out. And so that's what I've done here. It's not so bushy, it's not so drawn out, but it's now just as I want it. I can't physically put another single plant in this habitat at all. The game is literally topping out, and the Flamingos actually hate it if I put any more in. So this is as much foliage as I'm going to be able to get. Now I don't know how I'm going to tackle the stuff around the fences, and I need to find a way. And I haven't done the bridge yet. But I've now done the whole waterway, and it's now exactly as I want it with the flowing nature. And I've also managed to find a way of making the water look like it's rippling off of a bank, so I didn't have to use so much foliage along here. So going down the river, we've got all of the rocks, and I've decided to keep these exposed rather than having them banked. So I sort of thought, well, if the water's flowing down here quite fast, then you're not going to have as much foliage growing, because the current's going to be whisking it away, and it's never going to get a chance to take onto the rocks. I mean, in real life you might see a few plants, but for this, we're just going to say that it's not. And then you keep going and keep going, and then you've got the same principle. And so I need to sort out the heights and everything, but I've managed to find a way of sinking the fountain things into the ground, and then the water just bounces off the bank. And then if you put it close to a foam, it actually looks like it is bouncing off quite effectively. Same effect here. It's just the fountain splashes turned upside down, buried into rocks, and it just looks like the water's bouncing off. And then here where it gets narrower, I wanted to use a bit more, because the water would be flowing faster here, because it's all flowing through a narrower channel. And so I've put some more of the foam just to make it look like it. But I've only put it in the places behind rocks where the water would essentially be hitting and potentially forming some kind of current around this side, or around the back of the rock. And then underneath the bridge that will be built, and then you've got the same principle again. And I've decided to keep these quite open in the end. I took some of the foliage out and I've replaced it with shallower, narrower fern type foliage rather than having reeds. I think it's a bit overkill on the reeds in this habitat. They needed to flesh it out and to bulk it out, but yeah, I just needed something different. And then this is the open bank that I was talking about, and so I've managed to use the large fountain splash upside down and pushed right in. And as you can see, it now sort of bounces off, and they're placed right the way along in multiple areas. So even though there is now no foliage on this area and it's just a stark water line, it now ripples. So it now actually looks like it's supposed to be there. And then I've just brought this stonework down into the river itself, just to give it a bit of a platform. So now that the flamingos can now use this when they fill it up, and then it just comes down to the gate and to the end of the habitat. And so from the viewing area, this is what you can now see. So it's looking very good. It's looking quite open. It's looking quite nice. And you've got a good view now of the flamingos. So even though from the upper echelons when you're playing the game, it looks like it's quite barren. Everything sits quite nicely now on the landscape. So and you're about to learning their language, what the flamingos are. And then likewise with the seating area here, so you can look down on the river, and you can look over, and you can see the whole habitat, and you can now see under the bridge. So I've lowered the terrain underneath the bridge, so you can now see down there. And as you're walking, so I need to do all of this bit along here, and as you're walking along, you can now see that on the side of the building there's Flambos, and that's just a signpost to sort of like help you walk up that way. Just gives a bit of flavour to the building. And then you've got all of this along here, which I'm going to keep open. I want to keep this open. Feels like it needs to be kept open and then built up when it goes into the whatever building that's going to be. So that's where we're at the moment, and this has taken quite a lot of time to get ready. It's taken quite a lot of time to sort of get this feel for this river right, and how I wanted it. Remembering as well that it's not supposed to be fast flowing, it's supposed to be babbling, it's supposed to be a bit more gentle, it's not supposed to be intense, particularly as it ends up here and then down into the reflection pool. So it needs to be considerate of that environment. So I think the only thing that's left really on here now is just to shore up all of the areas, making sure that we're putting the education boards and stuff in. And then I think that's pretty much the flamingos going to be done. So yeah, that's how it's sitting on the landscape at the moment. I'm quite liking how it's filling that space quite effectively. So let's kick to the next update. Okay, so here we are, one completed flamingo habitat, and it's looking rather good in the nearly sunset. I've done a little bit of work to the front of this building just to give it its sort of final shape almost, just so I could see how shadows and whatever were cast on the actual habitat as the sun's setting. I needed to see how it was going to affect the water and everything, so I haven't done anything else. Nothing else inside is done. It's all still very much a work in progress there, all ready for the next episode for the croc exhibit that we're going to do. So yeah, it's all come together quite nicely. I'm liking how the river is now a thing down the exhibit, so it's now flowing quite nicely. I've put the fencing in for the bridge, and also I've done some touching up work just around this area as well, leading up to the building. I've put the retaining wall in. I've started to do some vegetation. Started to hide the backstage road all along here. I just put a couple of signs up and just a few bits of maintenance and whatever that I needed to do for this area. So it's looking like it's now leading up to the building, which obviously is going to be next episode. So here is the habitat. I've done some more signs, or not more signs, I've done signs, should I say, and I quite like how they've turned out actually. It's just the stone pillars, a couple of beams, and the actual TV screen with the flamingo information on it, and it's like, okay, well that kind of kind of works. It looks all right. And then I've done the bridge. It's all custom pieced, so you've just got the planks, the beams, and also the plaster things, just to give it that concrete foundation bit. So yeah, that's cool. The river itself is now flowing, and I've put some more of the upturned fountain pieces all down the river, so that you can see that it's now flowing and moving and whatever. And I also had a thought as well. This was a conscious thing that I did in the last episode, and I very much mentioned it, that all of this water that's coming from the habitat is flowing into the lake area that we've got at the front, and it then subsequently goes into the reflecting pool that we're then inviting people to go into. And that's a bit of a no-no when it comes to health and safety. So what I've done is done a bit of lore to the zoo. There's a bit of like, yeah, we need to be aware of some stuff, and there's now a water pump treatment facility in here. So we can say actually the water is treated before it comes down into the reflection pool, just to make sure, and that this waterfall is actually a fake waterfall. So if you imagine that there would be an inlet along here that was then treated the water, and then it sends it out and then back into the pump at the bottom, and then it goes right the way back up here, and then it's pumped back out into the crock as clean water as well, and then it just goes through a cycle. So it's probably going to be dirty by the time it gets to I say dirty, it's going to be a bit mucky by the time it gets down to the bottom here. It gets filtered out into the reflection pool and then back up again. So do a quick tour then of the actual exhibit itself. So I've kept this one nice and simple. Flamingo habitats tend to be simple. It's just in time for the darkness. They tend to be quite simple in design and quite low maintenance. They tend to be, looking at different pictures, I've seen various different ones. There's some that are just completely concrete, really unappealing, really uninviting, really not very good at all. And then I've seen others that are ridiculously overgrown, not through like not being kept or anything, but they're like there's foliage everywhere and there's vegetation everywhere and all sorts. And so I've kind of gone for a little bit in the middle. I've gone for a little bit of foliage, but quite open. Far too big an area, but it's fine. They've got loads of room to run around and do what they need to do. So we start up here by the building. So this is where their sleeping area is, and I've put some heaters inside for when it snows and when it's cold, so they can come and seek refuge, and put the bedding down so that they're comfortable. And I've sort of come up with this design. So again, we're going with this modern theme, and this whole window thing is going to stretch eventually right across the building. And I've just put these circles in. I don't really know why I thought about it or where it came from, but they just looked all right. And then you've got the pillars as well that are coming down here that just give it a bit of support. Yeah, and then you've just got the white plaster wall, just keeps it nice and clean, lines nice and modern and fresh. Yeah, so this is good, and that when they're inside, they look awesome when they sleep on the bedding. And then you've got the river outside of the front, so again it's just lined with rocks and loads of reeds, just to give it that natural feeling. Loads of water effects down the edges, just to give it the impression that the water is actually moving. You've got the bridge to cross so that the flamingos and the keeper can get across to the other side and to fill up all of the food items and whatever. I did this to this area. I'm not really entirely happy with it, but it's a foraging area. It's going to be needed when we've got lots of flamingos later on down the line. So I might change it if I can be bothered. But I wanted to keep them separate, and I wanted to keep them a little bit secluded off. Yeah, so it works. I think the crowning achievement here is the actual terrain itself, though. The way that I've painted the terrain so it looks like it's been trampled, and it's trampled between the food areas. It's also trampled around the bed area, but it's in various different degrees. So I've used both the hard soil and the soft soil to achieve that sort of look, and then the dappled effect with the grass, where it's just grown back or it's a bit more resilient. And that theme goes throughout. So like under the bridge, for example, I've done the same. It's painted as if they've been running up and down underneath the bridge. And all along the waterfront is all exactly the same. You sort of got patches of grass, but mostly it's either the rock or the soil where it's worn away. But then it gets grassier and grassier as you get back up towards the path. And then you've just got areas where you actually don't see the flamingos that much. I mean, I've not seen them that much up in this area. And that's why this is still sort of the grass and long grass. And then underneath here, I've used the long grass just to accent the pillars. So I wanted to give this effect that is slightly overgrown, as you would expect around the pillars. Similar principle that I use when playing Planet Coaster around the supports for coasters. But I've also used the long grass in this as well. So it's almost like it's not so maintained, but then you've just got this mud where they've been running through. And they've worn it down. And then I've done the same underneath the bridge as well. So underneath the bridge, where you might not get so much water, you might not get light, it gets a bit run down, so it's just muddy, but it's not complete mud. You would still have some sort of grass. Like you can see now, the sun is shining on this area here. And so I've made sure that where the sun would shine, you do still have some of the accent of the grass. But otherwise, underneath, it's all it's muddy. It's not really growing. It's a bit unkempt. It's a bit unloved. And I don't think the flamingos can actually get up there either. So it's a bit unused as well. So, and then coming back to the river, we've got exactly the same again. It's raining again. So it's lined with rocks. I took out quite a lot of the vegetation. It turned out it wasn't actually needed. And I like this effect. This just makes it so much more believable that where you've got these two rocks that are sticking out, of course you would have a bit of a current and it would be a bit sort of, because it's narrower, it's going from really wide up here to really narrow here. So I quite like how that's turned out. Yep, then you go across the bridge, so you can look at the flamingos from either this side, or you can turn around and look at it that side, and you can see the flambos down the building itself. Like I say, it's not finished, but that's the idea that I wanted, those flambos. And then you've got the river that continues all the way down to the picnic area, but we've also got a viewing area here, so we can look at them towards the bridge, towards the lake. And this is sort of set down from the restaurant and from the reptile house, so you have to sort of walk down, and it's quite nice. It's quite a secluded little area. It's away from the bustle of the path. You can sort of sit down and just chill out and watch the flambos as you do. And the wall here is just the Asia pillar support piece. Nothing special. They're just stacked on top of each other as if they've just been placed on top of each other. There's no cement. It's a bit of a dry wall, and so that sort of worked out quite nicely. And then behind it, just the reeds, just to bulk it out, and just to give that consistency with the actual exhibit itself. And then you walk up towards the restaurant, and then you've got the great view of either side. So you're looking towards the Flambos building, and I've deliberately put trees and whatever here to hide the building, to take it away from the sightline. I don't want the building to be obvious on the sightline, but I do want the Flambos to be obvious. So that's sort of there. And at night time, this lights up pink as well down the side of the building, and then on the front of the building, it's like white light that goes down. It's like down lighting on the actual building itself. And then you come into the picnic area. And so this is what I really wanted with the picnic area. This is exactly as I wanted this picnic area to be, in the sense that you can sit and you can chill out and you can just look across over the Flambos area, and you can see pretty much everything up to the bridge. And if like now they're not around, they're taking refuge because it's raining or whatever, or because it's cold, or just because they're not up this way, then you can sit and you can still enjoy the river and still enjoy the flowing of the water. But at the same time, you might be lucky and one might come right up here, but it can't go any further because this is slightly raised. So it's just raised off the ground, same level as the entrance pathway, and the terrain just dips down towards the river. So that's how the exhibit looks. And then these haven't changed since the update. They're just the foraging pools that I've just lined with, again, the same support pillars and some rocks, but I wanted them to still be obvious as foraging. I didn't want to hide them. I didn't want to go through all of that hassle. But yeah, look, they're looking really good. Hello. It's supposed to be pink. It's supposed to be fully pink. But yeah, they're so good, aren't they? They look really good. Hello. And then underneath the bridge this side, it's actually the same. I just haven't. Nothing's growing. Nothing's alive. And so there you go. That's the Flamingo exhibit, all done and dusted, and it takes up quite a vast area, but it's good on the landscape. It's good on the. It fits in quite nicely, and then you've got a serene path that comes down to the reflecting pool. So the next episode, I'm going to focus mainly on this building here, and I think it's going to be. I think I've changed my mind with what I want in here. I think it's going to be crocodiles rather than gharials. But I need to see how it pans out. And I don't know if the two can live together. Actually, I might try them and see what they do. But ultimately, what I want is this just to be the crocodile or the gharial or whatever exhibit. This is going to be a food place, and then I've had an idea for. I want to say it's going to be like a ratty house, but it's not. They're not rats. But I want to put the aardvark, the anteater, and the Chinese pangolin together. But I'm going to do some research in between episodes to see if they're, and I don't mean together in the same exhibit. They're going to be in the same building with three different exhibits, three different habitats. But I want to see if they would normally frequent in a zoo in the same area. It feels like they would be, but that's the idea. Like I want to put the three together and have a big modern building down here, purely because then it leads it quite nicely to a backstage area behind it, the road to come around, and that this road then is going to come around will then feed the other stuff that I've got this side as well, and then into what's going to come this side. But I don't think this building is going to be done anytime soon. I think I want to get this side done first and these moved over, the aardvarks and the llamas moved over. So the next episode will be this habitat, the crocodile habitat. Then I'm going to move over here because I want to do giraffes. I love the giraffes in game. It's just so cute, and then that lends itself to doing the llamas, and then going around that way. So that's how I plan. But thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for your interaction. And obviously, if you want to know when the next episode is up, you know what to do. Press the subscribe button, leave a comment, leave a like, do whatever interaction you want. I'll be there, ready to answer your comments. But until next time, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you soon. Take care.